Kasi ito po ay binanggit at sinulat mismo ng Secretary of State ng Amerika, si George Shultz. Meron siyang libro, ang pangalan ng kanyang libro, Triumph and Turmoil.
Yes.
Nagyabang siya doon sa libro na yon na sila, ang Washington, ang nag-ayos sa pag-alis
Ni
kay
President
President Marcos.
Oo.
Merong isang linya doon na memoryado ko na sinabi ni George Shultz, to remove Marcos, it's not a matter of how, but when. Ibig sabihin, na-set up na nila kung paano aalisin si President Marcos. Kaya yung sinasabi ni Atty. Gadon, hindi yan kwento. Ito, based on his experience at sa kanyang nakita at sa kanyang analysis, homegrown analysis. Ngunit sa kabilang dako, across the Pacific, yung mismong Secretary of State ng Amerika ang nagsabi, sila ang nagtanggal kay Marcos.
From the time pala na ibaba ni Presidente doon, alisin ang martial law, at doon na siya unti-unti na nilason ng mga Amerika at saka ng CIA ang pag-iisip ng mga tao.
Mabuti,
at saka andun yung pinahirapan talaga nila sa Presidente Marcos, yung pinutol nila yung export quotas natin ng mga ating sugar, textile, lahat yung pinahirapan siya, pati yung mga loans natin sa World Bank.
Lahat 148 banks.
Para lang mahirapan si
Oo,
Presidente
tumigil
Marcos.
sila ng credit. Pero anong ginawa ni Marcos? Nagpasok siya ng pera. Yan sa testimony ni Jaime Laya sa New York. It is court records, public records yan, na sinabi niya noong 1983, 148 banks ng World Bank and IMF withheld credit. Hindi sila nagbigay ng isang sentimo sa atin. Ang sabi ni Jaime Laya sa testimony niya, sinabi niya kay President Marcos, wala na tayong pera kasi ang World Bank tumigil. Anong sabi ni Marcos? Tumawag siya, certain banks in Switzerland. In a matter of days, may pumasok na $700 million dito sa ating kaban. Saan ang galing ito? Diyan sa mga bangkong binabanggit nila. The Swiss banks. Tinanong si Jaime Laya, do you know who owns those accounts? No, sabi niya. I only know that when President Marcos called, the accounts from these banks came into the central bank. Tingnan ninyo ngayon ang record ng central bank. Andyan pa yan. Meron pang naiwan. Meron pang natirang $35 million galing sa mga bangko na yan. Hanggang ngayon, pati ang PCGG hindi alam kung anong gagawin dyan sa mga pera na yan. Bakit? Kasi yung nag-utos niya, namatay na eh. Namatay na si President Marcos. Kaya tama yung sinasabi.
Pinalabas nila yan ng mga ill-gotten wealth yung para masiraan nila ng masiraan si Presidente Marcos.
Hindi yan ill-gotten. Kaya nga na-acquit si Imelda sa New York. Mahabang storya yan. Pero yung sinasabi mo nga, lahat dito kagagawan ng Amerikano. Na kung sino man ang gusto nilang ilagay, kaya nila. Pinasukan nilang Iraq. Pinasukan nila ang Libya. Pinasukan ng Afghanistan. Ang Syria. Ang Yemen. Lahat yan. Kaya delikado. At the time, he was going to make a state visit sa Amerika. He was invited to Washington for the first state visit of his first administration, 1966. Kaagad inimbita na siya sapagkat gusto nila doon mismo sa Amerika ay mag-aanunsyo si President Marcos na, okay, we will join the United States of America. To bring it to contemporary times, naalala niyo nagkaguro sa Iraq, yung tinatawag nilang Coalition of the Willing, ang ibig sabihin yan, yung mga sasama sa Amerika para lumaban sa Iraq. Ang nangyari naman nung panahon na yon, 1970s, ang gusto ng Amerika, yung kanilang allies dito sa Asia, sasama sa kanila para lumaban, kasama nila doon sa Vietnam. So President Marcos is invited for a state visit to Washington. And they were hoping, and they were actually dramatizing this, since the Philippines was a strong ally of America, and we are in a democratic way of life, Marcos will join the American soldiers in fighting the Vietnamese in Vietnam. So ano nangyari doon sa state visit niya? Pagdating niya sa American Congress at doon siya magsasalita, anong unang niyang sinabi? Excuse me. America does not forget. We were together with you in the battlefields and in the Philippines, and our blood, the Filipino blood, mingled with the blood of the Americans as we defended our country against your enemy, the Japanese. But since the Second World War, you have forgotten about the benefits that you should be giving our veterans in that war. We were part of the United States Armed Forces in the Far East, yung tinatawag na USAFE. That is the acronym for the Filipino soldiers who fought hand in hand and together with the American soldiers in defense of the Philippines and their bases here, fighting the Japanese. At hindi pa nabibigyan ng veterans benefits ang ating mga sundalo. Yun ang sinabi niya sa American Congress. Naku, nag-init ang Washington dyan. Parang wala siyang binanggit tungkol sa war in Vietnam. Wala siyang sinabi na sasama tayo doon. Kaya ito medyo nagalit nga ang Washington in a way, but they didn't want to show this. Kaya ang ginawa ni President Lyndon Johnson at the time, nagpatawag siya ng summit dito sa Manila 10 days after the state visit of President Marcos in Washington. It was America who called for a summit here in Manila. Together with, well, at that time kasi wala pang ASEAN. At the time, it was only the SEATO, Southeast Asian Treaty Organization. 5 bansa pa lang yan na miyembro niyan. Pinatawag yan 5 bansa na yan. Pinatawag din ng New Zealand, pinatawag ng Australia. Even the British, I think, were in attendance here in Manila for a summit. And again, they wanted to force the hand of Marcos to announce that we were joining the American troops to fight the Vietnamese in the Vietnam War. Hindi rin pumayag si President Marcos. So it was during that background and that time when sa United Nations naman, inimbita si Mrs. Marcos for the first time to speak and address the United Nations General Assembly. It was the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, who was at the time Secretary Carlos B. Romulo. But for that occasion, si Mrs. Marcos ang inanyayahan. Again, perhaps because the people in Washington would want to pressure also Mrs. Marcos to saying something to the United Nations na tayo ay sasama na sa Amerika dun sa gera nga sa Vietnam. But no, Mrs. Marcos spoke about a new human order. Instead of talking about a military order or an economic order, ang pinag-usapan niya ay yun na nga, whatever the objective of the United Nations is, it ought to be harmony and peace and unity among all nations. Yun ang kanyang diskurso doon. Ngunit, ang nangyari nga ay talagang medyo nag-init nga ang Washington kung bakit hindi tayo sumama. Yan na nga. Sabi nga ni President Marcos, again, we had a vision of a president who said, naku, 99 years ba yung ginawa ng Amerikano sa ating bases dito? Diyos ko, ang haba. So sabi niya, okay, we cut it down to 25 years. So 25 years na lang. And then, we review it every 5 years so that every change of administration, the president, incumbent, can be able to check whether okay pa ba yan ang bases na yan. Pero ano nangyari? Well, nature came in. Pumutok ang Mount Pinatubo. Hala, ayan na. Plus, there was this group of nationalists together with Mrs. Aquino. Prior to her administration, pumirma na sila ng tinatawag lang Convener's Pledge. Ayaw nila ng American bases dito. So even if Mrs. Aquino was set in power by the Americans, her Senate did not want the Americans here. So ano nangyari? Nagsabay. Yung expiration ng 5 years ng pag-review ng American bases by the Senate, hindi na nila tinuluyan. In fact, sabi nga nila, hindi na pwede magtayo ng bases dito ang Amerika. So that was the Senate of Mrs. Aquino. And then, what happened after that, pumutok naman ang Pinatubo. You could see the images then at the time. All of these American residents of these 2 bases in Clark and in Subic, they had to rush with all their belongings out of these 2 American bases. And that was the end of American bases in Clark and Subic. O natapos na sana yon, pero hindi. Nung dumating yung anak ni Mrs. Aquino, nagkaroon tayo ng tinatawag na, well, this was even before that, nung panahon pa ni President Ramos, nagkaroon tayo ng Visiting Forces Agreement. Ano ibig sabihin yan? Ang ibig sabihin, pwedeng bumisita daw yung mga American forces dito para i-training ang ating mga sundalo. Against what? I don't know. against foreign invasion, against foreigners who will again come into our country, against ourselves, against terrorists or against whatever. But anyway, that's the training. The Visiting Forces Agreement is supposed to train our military. Kung talagang napakagaling, paano nakapasok ang mga terrorists sa Marawi? Hala, sige na nga, isang tanong yan, wala pang sagot. Anyway, during the time of President Noynoy, ang nangyari naman ay, eto na, sabi ng mga Amerikano, siguro pwede na tayo makapasok ulit. And they did. So they came in with an agreement again with our government. They call it the Enhanced Philippine Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. Ang shortcut niyan, EDCA. Okay, nagpirmahan yan. And how one-sided the signing was. Can you imagine? Our Secretary of National Defense signing that agreement. That was the time of President Noynoy Aquino. So you had Gasmin, the Secretary of Defense at the time, signing that agreement. And the counterpart niya was just an ambassador, Ambassador Philip Goldberg. Parang hindi pantay, ano? Kailangan siguro Secretary of Defense din ng Amerika because this is an Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. Napakabigat because we gave them 5 bases here in the Philippines where they can establish their soldiers, their equipment, whatever war material they had. For what? To defend our country from what? So, hindi ko na lang babasahin ito, napakahaba ng EDCA agreement na yan, but that is what it was.